The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening, turning the Chicago streets into rivers. Sarah Mitchell stood in the doorway of Romano's Italian restaurant, watching an elderly man struggle with his walker just outside. His thin jacket was soaked through, and he was shivering violently in the cold October rain. Her manager, Richard, appeared behind her. "Don't even think about it, Sarah. Your shift ended 5 minutes ago, and we're not a homeless shelter." Sarah looked at the old man, then at Richard, then back at the old man who had just slipped on the wet pavement. In that moment, she made a choice that would cost her everything she couldn't afford to lose. Or so she thought. What she didn't know was that sometimes the people who seem to need our help the most are actually angels in disguise, sent to test who we really are when no one important is watching. Asterisk if you believe that kindness always finds its way back, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This story will restore your faith in doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. Asterisk. Sarah Mitchell was 32 years old, but some days she felt twice that age. She'd been working as a waitress at Romano's Italian restaurant for 4 years, ever since her husband died in a construction accident, leaving her alone with their 6-year-old daughter, Emma. The life insurance money had run out within a year. Medical bills from Emma's asthma treatments had drained most of their savings. Sarah's parents had passed away when she was young, and her husband's family had moved to Arizona after his death. It was just Sarah and Emma now, living in a small one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago, getting by on tips and Sarah's minimum wage salary. Romano's wasn't a fancy restaurant. It was a neighborhood place in a working-class area, where the customers were regulars who knew their waitresses by name. The tips were modest but steady. Sarah had calculated that if she worked 6 days a week and picked up extra shifts whenever possible, she could just barely cover rent, utilities, Emma's medical expenses, and food. There was no room for error. No emergency fund. No savings account. One missed paycheck would mean eviction. One unexpected expense would mean choosing between medicine and meals. But Sarah never complained. She smiled at every customer, remembered their usual orders, asked about their families. Her regulars loved her because she genuinely cared about them. Old Mrs. Patterson always requested Sarah's section because Sarah remembered that she liked extra lemon in her water. The Rodriguez family came in every Friday night, and Sarah always brought crayons for their kids before they even asked. Her manager, Richard Castellano, was a different story. At 45, Richard was a man who'd never quite achieved what he thought he deserved in life. He managed Romano's with an iron fist and a permanent scowl, treating the waitstaff like servants rather than employees. He was especially hard on Sarah, perhaps because her kindness to customers made his own coldness more obvious by comparison. "You're too slow," he'd say, even when Sarah was juggling 6 tables at once. "You're too friendly with customers. This isn't a social club, it's a business." Sarah needed this job too desperately to talk back. She'd swallow her frustration, apologize, and work harder. That Thursday had been particularly difficult. Emma had woken up wheezing that morning, her asthma acting up again. Sarah had used the last of Emma's inhaler and knew she'd need to refill the prescription soon. The copay was $85, money she didn't have until next week's paycheck. She'd dropped Emma at Mrs. Chen's apartment. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, watched Emma after school in exchange for Sarah helping her with grocery shopping and cleaning on Sundays. It was a fair arrangement born of mutual necessity, both women barely scraping by. Sarah's shift at Romano's had started at 11 a.m. and was supposed to end at 6 p.m. But Richard had asked her to stay late because another waitress called in sick. Sarah couldn't afford to say no. The extra hours meant extra tips, and extra tips meant Emma's medicine. By 8 p.m., Sarah's feet ached in her worn-out shoes. Her lower back throbbed from carrying heavy trays all day. But she kept smiling, kept moving, kept working. Just 2 more hours until she could go home to Emma. That's when the evening shift took an unexpected turn. Around 7:30 p.m., the restaurant had started to empty out. The dinner rush was over, and only a few tables remained occupied. Sarah was cleaning up one of her sections when she noticed the weather changing outside. Dark clouds had rolled in fast, and within minutes, rain began to fall. Not a gentle drizzle, but a torrential downpour that sent pedestrians running for cover. Sarah thought about Emma at home with Mrs. Chen. She'd have to walk 3 blocks in this rain to catch her bus, then another 2 blocks from the bus stop to their apartment. She didn't have an umbrella. Her jacket had holes in the pockets and wouldn't keep her dry. But there was nothing she could do about it except finish her shift and hope the rain stopped soon. At 8:45 p.m., Richard told her she could finally leave. Sarah counted her tips in the back room. $63. Not bad for a Thursday. Combined with her wages, it would be enough for Emma's medicine with a little left over. She put on her threadbare jacket, preparing to face the rain, when she saw him through the window. An elderly man, probably in his 70s, stood just outside the restaurant's entrance. He had a walker, the kind with wheels and handbrakes, but he was struggling to move forward against the wind and rain. His clothes were soaked through. He wore a thin brown jacket that looked decades old, and his gray hair was plastered to his head. As Sarah watched, the man took a step forward, and his walker slipped on the wet pavement. He nearly fell, catching himself at the last moment, but the effort left him gasping and shaking. Other pedestrians rushed past him, too focused on getting out of the rain to notice an old man in trouble. Sarah felt her heart clench. He reminded her of her grandfather, who'd passed away when she was 15. Her grandfather had been kind and gentle, always helping others, always seeing the best in people. Watching this elderly stranger struggle alone in the rain, Sarah could almost hear her grandfather's voice. "Baby girl, if you can help someone and you don't, you're choosing to let them suffer. And that choice says everything about who you are." "Sarah, what are you still doing here?" She turned to see Richard standing behind her, putting on his expensive leather jacket. Unlike Sarah's worn coat, his was new and waterproof. He had a large umbrella tucked under his arm. "There's an old man outside," Sarah said. "He's struggling in the rain. He looks like he needs help." Richard glanced out the window, his expression indifferent. "Not our problem. Your shift is over. Go home." "But he might fall. He's all alone out there." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. We are not a charity. That old man is probably homeless, probably looking for a handout. If you bring him in here, he'll expect free food, and then every vagrant in the neighborhood will think Romano's is a soup kitchen." "I wasn't going to bring him inside," Sarah said, though she hadn't really thought that far ahead. "I just thought maybe I could help him get somewhere safe." "On your own time, fine," Richard said coldly. "But don't expect to clock back in. Your shift ended 5 minutes ago. If you want to play Good Samaritan, that's your choice. But choose wisely. The rent on your apartment is due in what, 5 days? Can you afford to waste time on strangers?" The threat was clear. Richard knew exactly how precarious Sarah's financial situation was. He'd heard her on the phone with her landlord last month, negotiating a 3-day extension on rent. He knew she was one crisis away from disaster. Sarah looked out the window again. The old man had managed to move a few feet forward, but he was shivering so hard she could see it from inside. His lips looked blue even from this distance. "I have to help him," Sarah said quietly. Richard's expression hardened. "Then do it off the clock. And Sarah, when you come in tomorrow, we need to have a conversation about your future here. I need employees who understand priorities." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Sarah understood what he meant. Help the old man, and her job was at risk. Richard was looking for an excuse to fire her. She'd known that for months. He'd hired his nephew last month and had been trying to cut staff to make room in the budget. Every logical part of Sarah's brain screamed at her to walk away. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Emma needed her medicine. Their rent was due. Without Romano's, they'd be homeless within a month. But Sarah looked at that old man struggling in the rain, and she thought about her grandfather's words. She thought about the kind of person she wanted Emma to grow up to be. She thought about whether she could live with herself if she just walked away. "I understand," Sarah told Richard. Then she pushed open the door and stepped out into the rain. The rain hit Sarah like a physical force, cold and relentless. Within seconds, her jacket was soaked through, offering no protection. But she ignored her discomfort and hurried toward the old man, who was still struggling to move forward with his walker. "Sir? Excuse me, sir." The old man turned toward her voice. Up close, Sarah could see he was even worse off than she'd thought. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. His hands, gripping the walker's handles, were shaking badly. He wore thin canvas shoes that were completely soaked, and his pants were wet up to his knees. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, raising her voice over the sound of the rain. "Do you need help?" The old man looked at her with confusion, as if he couldn't quite process why someone was talking to him. Then his expression cleared slightly, and he nodded. I'm trying to get to the bus stop," he said, his voice weak and shaky. "But I can't. The walker keeps slipping." Sarah looked down the street. The nearest bus stop was 3 blocks away. In this rain, with the old man's walker slipping on wet pavement, it would take him at least 20 minutes to get there. He'd be hypothermic by then. She made a decision. "Sir, where are you trying to go? Where do you live?" "St. Michael's," he said. "The senior home. Near Lincoln Park." Sarah knew St. Michael's. It was a care facility about 2 miles away, too far to walk in this weather, especially for someone with a walker. The bus would get him close, but he'd still have several blocks to navigate. "Okay," Sarah said, her mind working quickly. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to help you get to the bus stop, and I'll wait with you until the bus comes." "Okay." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do that, miss. I don't want to be trouble." "You're not trouble," Sarah said firmly. She pulled off her jacket, which was already soaked anyway, and draped it over the old man's shoulders. "Come on. Let's get you out of this rain." She positioned herself beside him, one hand on his arm to steady him, the other helping guide his walker. Together, they began moving slowly down the sidewalk. Inside Romano's, through the rain-streaked window, Richard Castellano watched them go. He shook his head in disgust, then pulled out his phone and made a note. "Discuss termination with Sarah Mitchell tomorrow." The 3 blocks to the bus stop felt like 3 miles. The old man, whose name Sarah learned was Henry Morrison, could only move a few feet at a time before needing to rest. Sarah held onto his arm, keeping him steady, while the rain poured down on both of them. "I'm sorry," Henry kept saying between labored breaths. "I'm so sorry to be such a burden." "You're not a burden," Sarah insisted, though her own teeth were chattering from the cold. "Everyone needs help sometimes." "I was visiting my daughter," Henry explained as they slowly progressed. "She lives near here. But the bus was late, and then it started raining, and I thought I could make it back before it got too bad." "Is your daughter home? Could we call her to pick you up?" Henry's expression crumpled. "She works nights. She's a nurse at Northwestern. I don't want to bother her at work. She worries about me enough as it is." Sarah understood that feeling. She often didn't tell Emma about their financial struggles because she didn't want her daughter to worry. They finally reached the bus stop, a small shelter that offered minimal protection from the wind-driven rain. Sarah helped Henry sit down on the bench, making sure his walker was secure. "The bus should be here in about 10 minutes, Sarah said, checking the schedule posted on the shelter. But even as she said it, she doubted Henry would make it. He was shivering uncontrollably now, his lips definitely blue. The shelter wasn't heated, and the temperature was dropping as night fell. Sarah made another decision, one that would cost her money she absolutely didn't have. "Mr. Morrison, I don't think the bus is safe for you right now. You're too cold. I'm going to call you a taxi." No, Henry protested weakly. "Too expensive. I can't afford." "I'll handle it," Sarah said, already pulling out her phone. She had $17 in her wallet, plus the $63 in tips from tonight. A taxi to St. Michael's would probably cost $30. That would leave her $50 short of what she needed for Emma's medicine. She'd figure it out somehow. Right now, this elderly man's life was more important than her budget calculations. Sarah called a taxi company, grateful that her phone still had service despite her being 2 days late on the bill. The dispatcher said a cab would arrive in 8 minutes. While they waited, Sarah sat close to Henry, trying to share body heat. She talked to him, keeping him alert, asking about his daughter, his life, his time in the military. Henry had served in the Korean War, had been a high school math teacher for 35 years, had lost his wife 2 years ago to cancer. "My daughter, Margaret, she's a good girl," Henry said, his words starting to slur from the cold. "She wants me to live with her. But I don't want to be a burden. St. Michael's is nice. I have friends there. But some days I just miss my wife so much." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I understand. I lost my husband 4 years ago. Some days the missing doesn't get any easier." Henry looked at her with clearer eyes for a moment. "You're very kind. Not many people would do what you're doing. The world needs more people like you." The taxi finally arrived, its headlights cutting through the rain. Sarah helped Henry into the back seat, folding his walker and putting it in the trunk. She got in beside him and gave the driver the address for St. Michael's. The drive took 15 minutes through the rain-slick streets. Henry dozed against Sarah's shoulder, finally warm and safe. Sarah watched the meter climb. $15, $20, $25, $32. When they arrived at St. Michael's, Sarah helped Henry out of the cab and into the building. A nurse at the front desk recognized him immediately. "Mr. Morrison. We've been so worried. You were supposed to be back 2 hours ago." "I got caught in the rain," Henry explained. "But this angel helped me. I don't even know her name." "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Mitchell." The nurse looked at Sarah's soaked clothes and shivering form. "You look like you need to get home yourself. Let me call you a cab." "I can't afford another cab," Sarah admitted. "I'll take the bus." "Nonsense," the nurse said. "After what you did for Mr. Morrison, it's the least we can do." But Sarah shook her head. "Really, it's okay. The bus is fine." She turned to Henry, who was now in a wheelchair being prepared to go to his room for a warm bath and dry clothes. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Morrison. And call your daughter. She'd want to know what happened." "Thank you," Henry said, gripping her hand with surprising strength. "Thank you for seeing me. Most people don't see old folks like me anymore. We're invisible. But you saw me. You cared. That means more than you know." Sarah smiled, though her heart ached. "We all need someone to see us sometimes." She paid the taxi driver with her tip money, $32 plus a small tip, leaving her with $31. Then she walked out into the rain, which had finally started to ease, and began the long journey home. By the time Sarah arrived at her apartment at 11 p.m., she was soaked to the bone, exhausted, and coming down with what would definitely become a cold. Emma was asleep in their shared bed, her breathing slightly wheezy. Mrs. Chen had left a note. "Emma had a rough evening with her asthma. She needs her medicine refilled soon." Sarah changed into dry clothes, made herself a cup of tea she couldn't really taste through her stuffed nose, and did the math in her head. $31 left from tonight's tips. Her paycheck was due in 2 days, which would be about $300 after taxes. Rent was $500, due in 5 days. Emma's medicine was $85. Utilities were due next week, another $100. Even working every possible shift, even picking up extra hours, Sarah was going to come up short. And after Richard's thinly veiled threat tonight, she might not even have a job tomorrow. She'd done the right thing by helping Henry. She knew that in her heart. But as she climbed into bed beside her sleeping daughter, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if doing the right thing was a luxury she simply couldn't afford. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Sarah woke up feeling terrible, her throat raw, her head pounding. But there was no such thing as a sick day when you lived paycheck to paycheck. She got Emma ready for school, walked her to the bus stop, then dragged herself to Romano's for her 11 a.m. shift. Richard was already there, waiting with his arms crossed and his expression stern. "Sarah, in my office. Now." Sarah followed him to the small back office, her heart sinking. This was it. She was being fired. 4 years of loyal service, ended because she'd helped an old man in the rain. "Close the door," Richard said. Sarah did, then stood waiting for the axe to fall. "Your behavior last night was completely unacceptable," Richard began. "I explicitly told you not to waste time on that homeless man, and you directly defied me." "He wasn't homeless," Sarah said quietly. He was an elderly veteran trying to get home to his senior care facility. I don't care if he was the president, Richard snapped. You don't make decisions like that on your own. This is my restaurant, and when I give an order, I expect it to be followed. Sarah said nothing. What could she say? He was right that she'd disobeyed him. She'd made a choice, and now she'd face the consequences. I've been patient with you, Sarah. Too patient. But I can't afford employees who think they can do whatever they want. So effective immediately. He was interrupted by a knock on the office door. Not now, Richard shouted. But the door opened anyway, and Marco Romano himself walked in. Marco was the owner of the restaurant, Richard's boss. He was in his 60s, a first-generation Italian immigrant who'd built Romano's from nothing 40 years ago. He rarely came to the restaurant anymore, leaving the daily operations to Richard. Richard, I need to speak with you, Marco said. Then he noticed Sarah. And with Miss Mitchell as well. Perfect. Richard's face went pale. Marco, I wasn't expecting you. Obviously, Marco said dryly. He looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. Miss Mitchell, I received a very interesting phone call this morning. From a man named Henry Morrison. Do you know who that is? Sarah's breath caught. Yes, sir. He's the elderly man I helped last night. He told me quite a story, Marco continued, about how you left work in the pouring rain to help him when he was stranded and in danger. How you paid for his taxi out of your own tips. How you stayed with him until you were sure he was safe. Marco turned to Richard. He also told me that your manager here explicitly ordered you not to help him. Is that true? Sarah glanced at Richard, whose face had gone from pale to red. Yes, sir. And you helped him anyway, knowing it might cost you your job? Yes, sir. I couldn't just leave him there in the rain. He could have died. Marco nodded slowly, then turned to Richard. I'm very disappointed in you, Richard. Very disappointed indeed. Marco, let me explain, Richard started. Explain what? Marco's voice was cold. Explain how you ordered an employee not to help an elderly veteran who was in danger? Explain how you threatened her job because she showed basic human decency. He looked like a vagrant, Richard protested. I was protecting the restaurant's reputation. By being heartless. Marco shook his head. My father taught me that a restaurant is more than a business. It's part of a community, and communities take care of each other. That's how we've survived for 40 years while other restaurants failed. He turned back to Sarah. Miss Mitchell, I want to apologize on behalf of Romano's for how you were treated. And I want to tell you something about Mr. Morrison that you don't know. Sarah waited, confused about where this was going. Henry Morrison is not just a sweet old man, Marco continued. He's also a member of the Chicago Community Foundation's Board of Directors. They oversee charitable giving throughout the city, including grants to local businesses that demonstrate community values. Sarah's eyes widened. Mr. Morrison was so moved by your kindness, Marco said, that he called me personally this morning. He told me that in all his years on that board, he's rarely seen such selfless compassion. He said you gave up your own comfort and money to help a stranger, expecting nothing in return. Marco pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. The foundation is awarding Romano's a community service grant of $25,000, specifically because of your actions. That money will help us renovate our kitchen, update our equipment, and hire additional staff. Sarah couldn't breathe. $25,000? Because she'd helped Henry? Furthermore, Marco continued, Mr. Morrison mentioned that you have a daughter with medical expenses. The foundation is also providing a personal grant to you of $5,000 to help with those costs. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. $5,000? That would cover Emma's medicine for a year, plus their rent, utilities, everything they needed. I don't understand, she whispered. I just helped him because it was the right thing to do. Exactly, Marco said with a warm smile. And that's why you deserve this. You didn't help him hoping for a reward. You helped him because your character demanded it. That's the kind of person we need at Romano's. He turned to Richard, his expression hardening. Richard, you're being demoted. You'll remain as assistant manager, but I'm promoting Sarah to general manager, effective immediately. What? Richard's voice came out as a squeak. You can't. I can, and I am, Marco said firmly. Sir. H has demonstrated the values this restaurant was built on. You've demonstrated the opposite. You're lucky I'm not firing you outright, but I'm giving you a chance to learn from someone who understands what really matters. Richard's face was purple with rage, but he said nothing. What could he say? Marco handed Sarah the envelope with her grant. There's also a significant raise included in your promotion, plus health insurance that will cover your daughter's medical expenses completely. Sarah was crying openly now, unable to hold back the tears of relief and disbelief. Mr. Romano, I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me, Marco said gently. Thank yourself for being who you are. In this world, too many people choose convenience over compassion. You chose compassion even when it cost you. That's who we want representing Romano's. After Marco left, Sarah stood in the office, still holding the envelope, unable to process what had just happened. Richard had slunk away without another word, humiliated and demoted. Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a letter from the Chicago Community Foundation, thanking her for exemplifying the spirit of community service that the city needed. There was also a handwritten note from Henry. Dear Sarah, you saved my life last night, both literally and figuratively. I was cold, alone, and felt invisible. You saw me. You cared. Your kindness reminded me that there is still good in this world. The grant money is a small token of appreciation for your big heart. Use it to take care of your daughter and yourself. You deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way. With deepest gratitude, Henry Morrison. Sarah clutched the note to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She thought about last night, standing in that rain, watching Henry struggle, and making the choice to help even though it might cost her everything. She'd done the right thing. And somehow, miraculously, the universe had noticed. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her new office at Romano's, looking out at the restaurant floor. The renovations, funded by the community grant, had transformed the place. New kitchen equipment gleamed. Fresh paint brightened the dining room. Business had increased by 40% as word spread about the restaurant with heart. As general manager, Sarah had implemented new policies. All staff received health insurance. Wages were raised above minimum. A community board on the wall displayed information about local charities and people in need. Once a month, Romano's hosted a free dinner for seniors from St. Michael's and other care facilities. Richard still worked there as assistant manager. To Sarah's surprise, he'd actually learned from the experience. He was kinder to staff now, more patient with customers. He'd never quite apologized to Sarah directly, but his changed behavior spoke louder than words. Emma's health had stabilized with consistent medication and regular doctor's visits, all covered by Sarah's new insurance. They'd moved to a better apartment, still modest but safe and clean. Emma had her own bedroom now, painted her favorite color, purple. But the greatest change was in Sarah herself. She'd learned that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, doesn't always lead to disaster. Sometimes, impossibly, miraculously, it leads to blessings you never could have imagined. Henry Morrison had become a regular at Romano's. He came every Friday evening, always requesting Sarah's section even though she rarely waited tables anymore. They'd become genuine friends, with Henry teaching Emma basic math tricks he'd used in his teaching days, and Sarah making sure Henry never felt invisible or alone. One Friday evening, as Sarah sat with Henry during her break, he asked her something that had been on his mind. Do you ever regret it? That night in the rain, I mean. Even for a moment, before you knew how things would turn out, did you wish you'd just walked away? Sarah thought about the question honestly. I was scared, she admitted. I thought I was losing my job, that I wouldn't be able to take care of Emma. For a moment, standing in that rain, I wondered if I was being foolish. If being a good person was a luxury I couldn't afford. But, Henry prompted. But then I looked at you, struggling and alone, and I realized something. If I had walked away, if I'd chosen my own convenience over helping you, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. I wouldn't have been the person I want my daughter to become. And what's the point of providing for Emma if I can't also provide her with an example of who she should be? Henry nodded with satisfaction. That's wisdom, Sarah. Real wisdom. You taught me something too, Sarah continued. You taught me that people aren't invisible just because society treats them that way. Everyone matters. Everyone deserves dignity and help when they need it. I try to remember that now with all our staff, all our customers. I see them. Really see them. As if to prove her point, Sarah noticed one of their new waitresses, a young woman named Jessica, looking stressed near the kitchen. Sarah excused herself and walked over. Jessica, are you okay? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. My car broke down this morning, and I don't have money for the repair. I might lose my apartment if I can't get to my second job. Sarah didn't hesitate. How much is the repair? $400. But I can't ask you for. You're not asking. I'm offering. Consider it an advance on your Christmas bonus. And Jessica, you only need one job. I'm increasing your hours here and giving you a raise. You shouldn't have to work yourself into exhaustion just to survive. Jessica hugged her, crying with relief. I don't know how to thank you. Pass it on, Sarah said simply. Someday, when you can, help someone else the way I'm helping you. After Jessica left, Sarah returned to Henry's table. He was smiling. You've learned the most important lesson, he said. Kindness isn't a one-time act. It's a way of living. You received help, and now you're helping others. That's how we change the world, one person at a time. That night, after the restaurant closed, Sarah drove home to her apartment. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, her inhaler nearby but rarely needed anymore. How was work, Mom? Emma asked. Good, honey. Really good. Did you help anyone today? Sarah smiled. Out of everything she'd taught Emma, the importance of helping others had become the foundation. I did. I helped a coworker who was struggling, just like someone once helped me. Emma nodded seriously. She'd heard the story of the rainy night many times, how her mother's kindness had changed their lives. When I grow up, I want to be like you, Mom. I want to help people too. You already do, sweetheart. Every time you're kind to someone at school, every time you share or include someone who's alone, you're helping. You're making the world a little bit better. Later, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat by her daughter's bedroom door, watching her breathe easily for the first time in years. She thought about that rainy Thursday night, standing in the doorway of Romano's, watching Henry struggle. She'd made a choice in that moment, a choice that logic said she couldn't afford to make. But what she'd learned since then was that compassion isn't a luxury you can only afford when you're comfortable. Compassion is who you are when everything is on the line, when helping someone costs you everything you can't afford to lose. That's when it matters most. That's when it defines who you really are. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the universe notices. The right person sees your kindness and rewards it in ways you never expected. But even if they don't, even if no reward comes, you still made the right choice. Because the point of kindness isn't the reward. The point is being someone you can respect when you look in the mirror. Sarah pulled out her phone and texted Henry, "Thank you for giving me the chance to be who I wanted to be." Henry texted back immediately, "Thank you for showing me that heroes still exist. They wear waitress uniforms and help old men in the rain." Sarah smiled, turned off her phone, and went to bed. Tomorrow she'd go back to Romano's, continue building a business based on compassion and community, continue creating opportunities for people who needed them, continue being the person her daughter could be proud of. All because one rainy night, she'd made a choice. She'd chosen to see someone who felt invisible. She'd chosen kindness over convenience. She'd chosen to be who she wanted to be, regardless of the cost. And that choice had changed everything. Asterisk if this story touched your heart and reminded you why kindness matters, Smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you never miss another inspiring story. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that good deeds never go unrewarded. Have you ever helped someone even when it was difficult for you? Have you ever been helped by a stranger when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else to choose compassion over convenience. Remember this. The measure of your character isn't what you do when it's easy and convenient. It's what you do when helping someone costs you something you can barely afford to give. Those moments define who you really are. And the world is watching, even when you think no one sees. In a society that often teaches us to put ourselves first, to look out for number one, to ignore other people's problems because we have enough of our own, be the person who stops. Be the person who helps. Be the person who sees the invisible people around us and treats them with dignity and compassion. Because you never know when the person you help in the rain might be the angel who saves your life tomorrow. See you in the next story, where we'll explore another powerful lesson about humanity, sacrifice, and the unexpected ways that kindness comes back to us when we need it most.